It seems that pretty much every woodworker says that pretty much every woodworker makes a cutting board at some day. But I already made a few in the past. But now it's my turn to make a cutting board video. This one right here is the first cutting board I ever made. It's about 2 years old and gets used every single day. And therefore it's holding up pretty well. And as you can see, I didn't go too fancy with the pattern on this one. But still, some of my friends really liked it and wanted to have their own cutting board. So I tried to recreate it with a little bit different pattern. I used the same wood and then made this cutting board. And this sort of wavy twisted pattern in the middle all came out by accident. When I put it together, I didn't know that it would come out like this. But I really like this pattern, so now I'm gonna try to recreate exactly this pattern on my new cutting boards. The key is to use a piece of wood with sapwood being part of it, and it has to be at a slightly angled curve. And these two colors have to make a nice contrast to each other. The wood I used for this was ash wood. And I have some more, actually a lot more ash to make the new boards. I'm going to use 6 different species of wood on this cutting board. So I have wangi, oak, birch, kumbala, maple and the ash.
After I had decided what wood I want to use, I went back to the computer to come up with a design, and that looks about like this.
I also made a side view of the glue up as well as a cut list for all the different species.
Having a cut list really speeds things up. You may also notice that I don't use my regular ripping blade but one of the Freud blades. That's because it has a thinner surface. Most of the wood I'm using are offcuts or smaller pieces, so I wanted to save as much wood as possible, and therefore a thinner surface is very helpful. Then I cut all the pieces to the same width.
Okay, now everything is cut out for 2 boards and now I have to lay it out in this order. Alright, here are the 2 boards laid out and they don't look that great yet, especially the middle. But that's because we're looking at the side grain and not the end grain.
Now it's time for some glue. Because I'm making an end grain cutting board that will get wet during use and cleaning, you need to use waterproof glue. To spread the glue evenly, I used a paint roller and that worked really well. You also shouldn't be shy on the amount of glue you're using. Then I clamped straight sticks over the board, which helps to keep everything flat. And once they were in place, I tightened the 4 big clamps. I cleaned most of the squeeze out right away, so I won't make a mess all over the place.
Both boards are glued up. Now we have to wait. Oh! The first glue up is done and I already cleaned the glue drips off. Now I have to get the surfaces smooth and parallel. The easy way would be to use a planer, but as you can see my planer is not big enough. So instead I'm going to use my drum sander.
But before that I just cut off the overhang. The drum sander has a 60 grit paper attached, so it doesn't require too much time to get the board smooth. But one problem I still have is that this machine is way underpowered. I only equipped it with a just over 1 horsepower motor. For a sander this size, a 3, 4 or even 5 horsepower motor would be adequate.
Okay, both boards are sanded smooth. Now I can chop them into the individual sticks and turn them around to expose the end grain.
I set the fence to 2.9 centimeters, which will be the thickness of my cutting boards. This procedure is pretty much the simplest. You just have to cut sticks of the same size. In my case, these are 15 sticks. But eventually the board got too small to use with the crosscut fence, so I used the ripping fence for the last ones.
Both boards are cut into the strips, now I can flip them over to expose the end grain. And now to create the actual pattern, I have to flip every other one around. Right now now it doesn't look too good because the oak pops a little bit more out without oil applied. But in the final result you can see that ash and the oak have a nice contrast to each other, and the ash pops out and makes the whole design visible. On this one you can see it a little bit better, but we'll have to wait until the oil gets applied.
This glue up is basically the same as the first one, only this time all pieces have the same size.
It's a good sign if glue squeezes out everywhere. That means that all surfaces are well covered with glue. I designed the boards to have a frame around them, but I can't do this in just one glue up. So the thing to do now is to make parts that will make up the rest of the frame, and I have offcuts left over from cutting all the pieces for the boards, and they will work just fine for this.
Turned out that I didn't plan this glue up very well, so I was just throwing clamps on it like crazy. Once dry, I straightened both sides and cut it into pieces.
The boards are out of the clamps and I chopped this into pieces, so now I can finish up the frame. And these open corners are filled with another piece of maple. And before gluing the strip together, I trim this piece down so it completes the frame exactly. Now it fits perfectly. For gluing this strip up, I need to make sure that this surface is exactly straight, because this is the surface that will be glued to the rest of the board. And to do this, I clamp the strip to this straight piece of wood with masking tape, so this should work out. Having enough small bar clamps is also very helpful for this, but as you can see I don't. So I let the glue set for about 5 to 10 minutes and then I can remove the clamps and go on with the next one. While these strips are drying, I can prepare the mating glue surfaces on the boards, because they are not straight anymore after the glue up. Okay, that's done. Now I just have to wait another hour for the glue of the strips to dry. Boom, it's done!
I gave them a quick sanding to make the glue surfaces smooth.
For this final glue up, I have to take care that the dark part of the frame lines up exactly. And now we again have to wait for the glue to dry.
Eventually it was dry and I could cut it into the final dimensions while taking care that the frame of the board has the same width all around.
Now the fun part of this project is over. Now comes the not fun part, sanding.
This time you're sanding end grain, which is much harder to sand. Having a drum sander or any other powerful sander is almost essential for making a cutting board. I actually built mine 2 years ago because of a cutting board that I had to sand. Then I run it over the corners with the bandsaw and the disc sander. And one of the boards gets a cutout on one side, and at the end of the video I show what this is for.
Okay, so after quite a lot of sanding, the boards are now ready for finish. I put them on 4 nuts to raise them a little bit from the table, and I put on a coat of linseed oil.
This now is probably the best moment of a cutting board production, seeing how it looks like with oil applied.
Because the whole surface is end grain, the first coat is already soaked up and I can apply another coat.
After 15 minutes I wipe off the excess oil with a clean rag and put on a coat of food-safe wax. It's the same stuff that I use on my bowls. And with a really improvised tool I buff it.
Alright, the boards are now finished and ready to use. But unfortunately the pattern I was aiming for in the middle didn't come out that great. On this one you can see the wavy thing a little bit, but on this one you can't see it at all. I guess on this one I was just really lucky with the wood. I used the same species, the same part of the wood, but here it just has some different texture as well as here. But still I think these are great looking cutting boards. And you're probably still wondering why I made this cutout here. Well, I'll show you. So last year I made this serving card for my sister's birthday, and it has some special features. It has a replaceable insert plate, and right now there is one for cutting bread. And when you cut bread, there are all the breadcrumbs, and they can fall through and fall into a drawer, and you can just simply clean it out. This board is a little bit high, so when you're cutting bread you don't cut into the actual top. Then it has another drawer and some more storage space. But when I first made this thing I planned to include a cutting board, but I never get to it, well, until now. So now you can take this board out and store it on the side. Now I can take the cutting board and set it into place. And it is flush with the top. It fits a little bit loose, but I did this on purpose because the solid wooden top shrinks and expands due to seasonal humidity changes, so the cutting board can never get stuck in this opening. The bread cutting board sits on 4 screw heads in each corner, and it is strong enough therefore. But for the end grain cutting board I thought that the corner screw heads wouldn't be ideal, so I added these in the middle, so if you do some heavy cutting in the middle of the board it can't break. And the best thing is that my sister doesn't know that I made her another cutting board. It's not my birthday present for her this year because her birthday is already 4 months back. But still, I think it's a nice surprise. This one right here is the first cutting board I ever... No. It's pretty... Okay, so everything for the 2 boards... Camera fail? Okay, so everything for the boards is now cut out. So the thing to do now is to glue up the... rest parts that will make up the rest of this frame. So the thing to do now is to glue up the rest of the that will make up the rest of the frame. Parts that will make up the rest of the frame. Parts that will make the rest of the frame. Parts that will make up the rest of the frame. Parts that will make up the rest of the frame. On this one, you know, you can't see it at all.